Hey friends, welcome to Bokeh, a podcast exploring the ever-blurring lines between the personal and business lives of professional photographers. This is your host, Nathan Holritz, and I'm bringing you a special episode of the Bokeh Podcast today called Workflow Wednesday. During these special edition episodes, myself and my co-hosts will focus on helping you develop more efficient daily and weekly workflows around post-production, communication, task and project management, time management, file and image management, and yes, the list does go on. We're going to save you an incredible amount of time in your work week, and we promise not to be too nerdy. This podcast is brought to you by Photographers Edit, custom image editing for the wedding and portrait photographer. Visit photographersedit.com.
And welcome to yet another Workflow Wednesday webinar series, Workflow Wednesday webinar series. This is your host, Nathan Holritz, and I'm here with my friends Haylee. Hi, Haylee.
Hey, Nathan.
And Rich, Heather. Hey, guys. How are you?
Hey,
good.
Friends.
It's the spooky, good Facebook Live video.
Well, yeah, I know. We should have thought ahead. So for those of you who are in the U.S., obviously, you know this is Halloween, and if we would have thought ahead of time, we would have dressed up. But Rich actually preemptively dressed up today. You'll never guess who he's trying to look like. We'll let you. If you want to submit any comments about who you think he might be dressing up as, you're more than welcome to.
I can only hope.
We should offer a gift code to the one who cracks that code.
That's true. Actually, it's a great point. And then we have a new friend of mine. I actually just recently interviewed Keala for the Bokeh Podcast, an audio episode that will be coming out pretty soon. But Keala, so graciously, last minute, was willing to join us for Workflow Wednesday today. So Keala, welcome to the show.
Hi, excited to be here.
Well, and it's really, really great to have you. And I'll add a couple of side notes here. Number one, we're using a bit of a new platform here for Workflow Wednesday. So bear with us as we're kind of working through adjusting to the new platform. Any potential technical issues, as we always do, we will work through them best we possibly can. But we are doing this on Facebook Live. So for those of you who are listening to the podcast version after the fact, we push this out to the podcast on Wednesday evenings. And then this is 2 p.m. Eastern on Facebook Live, facebook.com/photogsedit, PHOTOGSEDIT. This goes out to the Photographers Edit Facebook page live. And if you're listening to the audio version, don't hesitate to come back and watch the video versions. If you have the opportunity to live, you can actually comment, ask questions, make suggestions, or otherwise make faces, or at least send us emojis that would suggest the face that you're making. And engage with us, because we love a conversation. And Haley's going to be watching those comments and share those with the group as they come in. So don't hesitate to join in and comment. But we are hitting up another topic this week, which is something that we really haven't delved into a whole lot on the podcast as a whole, but certainly not on Workflow Wednesday. And that is IPS, in-person sales. We're going to get to that here in just a second, but just very briefly, Keala, since you're kind of our guest of honor today, and you're going to be sharing your experience with IPS with us, will you just briefly share about your business, the website, what type of photography that you currently do?
Yeah, so I'm at kealajarvis.com, and that is spelled KEALAJARVIS. And I am an international portrait photographer for the adventurous soul, mainly highlighting seniors, but now merging with families as well, because, families come together abroad, not just with the teenagers, So, I highlight seniors. That's kind of my jam. Now that I have a baby, I really get the whole family deal. I just love photographing, but those are my favorites.
Well, and I have to say, your senior photography in particular impressed me. I was looking at your Instagram account yesterday, which is also Keala Jarvis. Is that correct?
It's Keala J Photo.
Keala J Photo. Okay, so for those of you listening in, of course, we'll link to that in the show notes as well. But make sure you go take a look at Keala's work. I mean, both the family work and the senior work, wonderful. But the senior work, you see such a wide variety of senior photography. And I was particularly struck by your senior photography work. Props to you for that. But you mentioned being an international photographer. Tell us where you're actually chiming in from.
Yeah, so I'm actually coming in from Warsaw, Poland at the moment. So there's Halloween over in America right now. That's definitely not happening here. So It's pretty much non-existent. I have a 7-month-old. I got him all dressed up as a pumpkin and I took him out and everybody was kind of like, what
are you doing?
He's super cute, but like they were not into it, but that's okay.
Well, I appreciate you, despite the time difference, making time for us today. And I kind of want to just jump right into this topic because, as I've alluded to on the podcast before, certainly in our interview, which is going to be coming out here in the near future, this is a loaded topic. To try to squeeze it into an hour or even less than an hour is a tough thing to do. So we're just going to dive right in. And IPS, in-person sales, I mean, I would say personally, I chose not to go that route with my business because I wanted to avoid honestly, I was concerned about the amount of time that it would take to do in-person sales after the fact. Instead, I wanted to go ahead and spend time shooting weddings that would make me a premium up front and then not worry about sales after the fact. We were working with a company called Pictage when I was shooting full time. We'd upload the images, the prints were sold through Pictage. Pictage would actually do some marketing work for us, so we didn't have to worry about that. It was just a very nice hands-off, kind of simple existence as a photographer. And yet the reality I realize now in particular, looking back in hindsight, is that I was leaving a lot of money on the table. And so fear of the time cost involved is certainly one of the fears. And we're going to get into some of those other fears on the episode where I interviewed you specifically about IPS. And again, this will be coming out soon for those of you who listen to the Bokeh Podcast. If you're not currently listening, go to Bokeh, Bokeh podcast.com and make sure you listen in to that podcast. But I would also say, too, that the fear of the unknown is probably one of the main reasons why photographers don't dig into IPS. They hear in-person sales. They're scared of the idea of being a salesperson to begin with, but then all the moving parts associated with that also makes them apprehensive. And so I want to address that very fear today and let you just kind of take us through this process of IPS, what it looks like, so that our listeners can get some context, some perspective. Myself, Haylee, Rich, and Heather, we're going to probably chime in with questions here and there. And we'd love for you just to enlighten all of us. But maybe we can start, first of all, with just how do you manage the expectations of your client when they go to and they see your session fee? They're like, I'm going to spend X amount for, say, a portrait session in this case. I'm going to spend this amount, but I'm not. Are you telling them up front, hey, you're not getting any finished product to go with that? You're coming to my studio after the fact for a sales session. What does that conversation look like?
That's a really good question. So how I set that apart is I've actually put my sitting fees and my packaging pricing side by side. So that way, hopefully they kind of put them together. That one is just for like the time for seniors at like hair and makeup and a little bit of like the session and the planning. And then hopefully they look over to the side and notice that that's where all of the products and the social media images are attached. So I've only had one client who hasn't like read anything, but in the past, how long, about 3 or 4 years that I've been doing IPS, I've only had one that was like totally blindsided. But
really?
Once
Okay.
I started doing them side by side, that helped out a lot. When I had it where it was a sitting fee and then I had the collection on the bottom, or vice versa, like on my like PDF that I sent all my clients, that's where like I had some questions and confusion because they see the first thing and then they're like, okay, and they think they've seen it all. But putting them side by side was super helpful for that.
Now, is this pricing that you're putting on your website, or do you send them like an introductory PDF of sorts? You alluded to a PDF, I think, to their email after they've requested the information?
Yeah. So on my website, I have a starting point range that combines like sitting fee or my bottom package a little bit. That way it helps filter out, people that aren't in my price point range. Like that just kind of helps find a more of an ideal client. So that way they kind of, hopefully when they look at that, they inquire with me, then I can give them more information. Because again, with social media, it's like dating, the website's like engagement. And then hopefully after they get the email and they book, that's like the marriage. So I don't want to overwhelm them too much. I just kind of want to slowly introduce them to like each part of the process, Then we go over more of it. And then if we're still a good fit, they'll book me.
And, I think I commented on this in our audio podcast interview, but I have to give you props for the very clean, simple layout of your website, because there's a tendency that a lot of photographers have to clutter their websites with a lot of text, especially on the About Me page. And it's easy to get lost in that. And the reality at the end of the day, like you're saying, is you're trying to make a really positive first impression, but throwing lots and lots and lots of information at that person up front would be like that person on the first date giving you their life story right off the bat. And you're like, that way too, it's just TMI. Like, I don't need all that right now. I just want to look at you because I think you're hot, like that kind of interaction. Yeah. So I love that you have very proactively created a website that looks that way. And I think it's a good first impression. And it does beg, I guess, a desire for more information. So they make that inquiry, then you're sending them or attaching a PDF to the email response. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. So I do two things in my email response because, again, I'm working with a clientele, and it might be kind of everyone at this point, but for sure for teenagers, they don't read a whole lot. So I really have to do like highlights and bullet points, which is why my website's very simplistic. In my email, I have in the summary just like a small paragraph of what like my pricing is and kind of like basic expectations. And then hopefully they look at the PDF that I made that goes through pretty much everything that's involved in the experience of working with me. And that's where the pricing is really broken down. But again, I have to do both because you never know. And whenever you have those incidents with clients where like they get to a certain point in your process and then they have questions and you're like, didn't we cover this a little bit earlier? Didn't you read, so that kind of helps out just in case they're only reading the email, just in case, just covering everything.
So you said you're talking about seniors going to your website. Man, this is the first time I saw myself big, and then whoa, hello, man, I look so much different without glasses on. So you have mostly seniors inquiring with you, or their parents? I mean, like who are you dealing with the most? Because obviously the parents are the ones with the money.
Right.
So how does that work with seniors?
That's a really good question. So yes, I primarily work with seniors, and I get about 50-50 at this point. I first started out with the seniors inquiring with me. So on my inquiry form, for anybody who's a senior photographer, I highly recommend this, having them put the parent information in. So when I send the information to book me, then it CCs the parent so they see as well. Because yes, you're correct. They're the ones who are paying for the session, and you want to be able to meet. And that's the great thing with IPS, which I know we'll get to in a second, is that with social media images that are in my collections, that's how kind of I do my pricing. It meets their needs, but the print products meet the parents' needs. So you have to accommodate for both, which is a pretty tricky thing. But yeah, I CC the parents. They have to give me their information, because obviously they need to be in the know if they're going to be writing me the check.
Yeah. It's a great point. I like too that you are accommodating this tendency, especially understanding your market, which is always an important concept, that you're accommodating the scrolling culture, right? Everybody's used to social media. They're very quickly going through information. So instead of giving them too much information up front, as you pointed out, simple information in bullet point format that's easy to kind of take in. And then the more detailed information to go along with that, especially for the parents too, as they're going to be looking at that information. So let's kind of go ahead and go into then the actual shoot itself. When you go to photograph this client, they've decided to book you. You're going out to meet them are you shooting a studio? Or are you going on location, or a combination of the above?
I mostly do on location. I have found that my clientele really likes to be. They don't really like the studio vibe. I mean, I'm all for it and I push it every once in a while, but no one really I try and get nibbles and I don't get any, which is fine. But yeah, they're mostly on location. Right now, what's really popular is the mountains and fields, So I'm there for like all the time with bug spray.
Yeah, and we can kind of relate to that these days. We've had quite the issue here locally with mosquitoes, and it was horrendous. Rich, you were talking about having canceled a number of sessions, correct?
Yeah, I had to actually either cancel it or speed up the process because my clients were just over it. They're just like that
was unusual though for this area.
It's not just like one mosquito; it's like swarms of mosquitoes.
Swarms, yeah.
And like I would have tried, and like everything started becoming really fake, and which I really hate with images. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to just count to 3, and you just like try to fake a smile because you're like, and quit trying to swat mosquitoes. But I'm like, this is just not working.
Yeah. Well, I am curious though, if Keala, you're approaching the shoot in a particular way with this idea of IPS in mind, whether that is you're shooting more or you're shooting less. Are you taking a particular number of images per series? Are you shooting for a particular number of series of images to then give to the client or display to the client later on? What does that process look like? Do you actually shoot for the sake of IPS?
So yes and no. I kind of am 50-50 because again, the seniors don't really care about the print products, but the parents do. And then what the photos of the seniors like of themselves, the parents usually don't like, but the photos the parents like, the seniors don't like. So I put in my order session, I show 45 edited images. And usually depending on how the pre-consult goes, which is where I do a lot of my like expectation setting, is I kind of get a feel of like what percentage of like traditional senior photos for the parents versus kind of the more artistic editorial for the senior, and where that percentage line should be. Usually I try and keep it 50-50, but sometimes like the parents are really into they love the artistic stuff as well. And so I do usually more of that. And then with like a hint of like the ones that will go in the grad announcements or on the wall or in an album. But the pre-consult is actually where I kind of, again, set the expectation again, because I want to make sure that what I'm photographing is for their house is going to fit their style if they already have something there. So on top of like planning out the session, planning out their outfits and everything, I just get an idea, where in your house is this going? Do you like the close-ups, far away, landscape, or portrait? All of those like little questions, just so that I make sure if they're like, oh, I have a specific spot on the wall and I want it landscape, that I concentrate on landscape instead of just doing, or, because every once in a while, like certain sessions, like I'll notice if they don't have a preference, that there's maybe one orientation I kind of go towards more. It just depends on the session. But if they're like, oh shoot, like it was a portrait and I shot like so much landscape for like the, close up traditional photo, then that's really hard to sell. So just kind of, it helps me to set the expectation. So when I'm planning out the shoot in my mind, what kind of photos will be on the wall, albums, sending to grandparents and stuff like that.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, no, it definitely does. So that consultation, is that usually happening in person, or are you doing that virtually, or a combination of the above?
Well, now everything's pretty much virtual. But before it was in person. So they would bring for my senior sessions, they would bring like all of their clothes, and then we would plan out their outfits. I do mood boards because I feel like most of it, just a visual person. And so to kind of get into their brain, I have them put a mood board together. We plan all of that out. So then they're really excited. But then while the parents there, that's when we talk about, okay, like what are we thinking for your walls? Who do we have to keep in mind of like any aunts, grandparents and stuff? That way it's just slowly planting that seed so that they're knowing to expect that is coming. So it's not like we're planning this out again, because they have their own lives. They're not like reading everything that I give them. So it's just a verbal way for us to be on the same page, and I have their attention to talk about it.
And you mentioned a mood board. Can you describe what that actually looks like? And I'm assuming that's also a virtual thing as well?
Yeah, so I have them do a Pinterest, and I have a bunch of mock-up mood boards on my business one. It's Keala J Photo, if anybody wants to see it. And I have them use that because a lot of them don't know what that means. So I I have a lot of like mock-up ones, and I usually pull from those. And then I look through it, and while we're like meeting together, have them talk about what they liked about each thing. And then from that visual and by what they're telling me, I try and come up with like a couple of words that's like the theme of their photo shoot. And that for me, because I view my seniors like we collaborate together, because I mean, all of my seniors are different. Like every single person's different. And so I want to capture who they are, but in my artistic way, so.
And finding. Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah. So you say you actually meet with these clients, but you also said you're like an international photographer. Like, how does that work when like you may be in the United States at the moment, but next month you're going to be shooting somebody like in like Poland or Iceland or something like that. Like how does that work as far as like your communication with them, because you can't exactly get together with them,
Right. So now, because I've been in Poland now for about 9 months, so it's pretty recent. So everything pre-consult wise is now virtual. But when I was I was primarily working in Utah. When I'm in Utah, then I would just meet with them in person, just because, again, I want them to be comfortable with me in front of the camera. So for me, that it was like there were just so many wins with this meeting in person. Mm-hmm. I just have to work a little bit harder at the session in that first 15 minutes to break the ice a lot quicker.
Yeah.
I really love the focus on communication here too. I mean, naturally, it makes sense to put even more emphasis on communication, and more specifically the management of expectations going into something like IPS. But I think this is something, regardless of whether or not photographers are actually implementing IPS in their business, that they emulate or at least get some ideas from, because I don't know that we can communicate too much. I mean, at least in most cases, and especially when it comes to managing the client's expectations for the sake of a more positive experience. I think you're setting a really wonderful example of a very detailed communication process, which would benefit literally everyone listening in who's running a photography business. But I'm curious to kind of switch gears now. We go from obviously the booking of the client to the shoot, and you have in mind what you're going to do for this client in the sales process afterwards as you're photographing. But then you've got to get these images processed or process them. Is there any element of the post-production that also you are keeping IPS in mind through that process?
Yeah, especially when I'm going through, I use Photomechanic to cull through my images. And the main part is like those really, like I want all of my photos to be super, super crisp. It's because I'm anticipating, especially for those classic ones, if they're blowing them up, to like no one's in a 30x40 for me, but like if they wanted to, then it wasn't blurry. So obviously, like everything being in focus is very, very crucial for me when it comes to me thinking about IPS. But as far as now I just edit quicker. I edit my images as soon as I get home. I'm done in about an hour and a half.
Wow.
Because now that I have a baby, it's like, when I get home, he's already asleep. I edit all of them. And then I get ready for the order session, like the day of. I've just done it so many times. I guess it just does, the workflow is really consistent and cohesive and efficient. There's the word I'm looking for. Very efficient.
Well, efficiency obviously is such an important element of the conversations that we have here on the Workflow Wednesday. To that point, actually, I'm curious. One of the things that I've gotten the impression from photographers in the last, I'd say in the last couple of years or so anyway, is that photographers are putting a lot more effort into the post-production work, especially if they're doing it themselves. They're not outsourcing to Photographers Edit or another editor. They're putting a lot more effort and energy into what are, in reality, just proof images before they give those proofs to the clients. And in my mind, that is ultimately not efficient, because you're putting work into all the images when the reality is they may only order large prints of maybe 2 or 3 of those images. Or if you're shooting a wedding and you're delivering 800 images, maybe only 50 of those images are going to go in an album. Why would you put that much work into essentially retouching, not only color correcting, but retouching all of these images? There's a significant time cost involved. Or if you're outsourcing your editing, there's the cost of paying somebody else to do that work. So are you retouching every single image that you're then displaying to the client? And if not, how do you manage the expectations of the client up front so that they understand they're seeing proof images, you're going to do the retouching work after the fact?
Gotcha. So that is one way to do IPS. When I first did seniors, that was the method that I did. So I would meet with them the next day and they were, I call them clean edits, which is what I do through Lightroom. Now I just edit them completely, just because I find with IPS, and this is the thing that's really tricky about it, is there's a lot of trial and error, because for different photographers and different niches, like there are different needs and things that work better for, ideal clients. So keep that in mind for those of you that are interested in going to IPS. Like this, when Nathan says it's a heavy topic, it's a pretty heavy topic, because there's so much, even in like how you do your order session or how you structure your collections and pricing, that can be very varied and very customized to what works best for your business. Now I forgot the question. Oh, how long? Okay. So I give them, they're fully edited images. So I do a clean edit, and then I take I'm at like a minute and a half of just photoshopping each one. Mm-hmm. Again, that's just because time is very valuable to me. So like, especially with editing, because for me, I'm one of those who I don't love to edit. So it is easy to simplify it, because I'm not obsessed about every little detail. Because I have found that my clients, they don't obsess about it as much as I used to. And so like you were saying, like I realized I was putting so much time into like a single image that they didn't even notice, or when they did it less, they didn't care maybe. So
I have to interrupt or interject here, because I wish we could like hit pause, rewind, and then play that, and that little about 15-minute segment over and over and over and over and over again for photographers. Because one of the big apprehensions, of course, when it comes to whether or not to outsource editing, is that a lot of photographers say, well, they're going to know that it's not my editing style, or my clients, they need to know, or they want to know that it's me that's touching the images. And the reality is, at the end of the day, that 98% of clients, or probably even more, aren't going to notice those nuanced details. And so to put so much emphasis on it, to kind of what really amounts to projecting our preferences and our perspective on our clients when it comes to how those images are processed, it's misleading ultimately for us. And it ultimately, as you're pointing out, Keala, is potentially eating up a bunch of time unnecessarily. And of course, that time is money in the end. It's costing us. Mm-hmm. So I love that you point that out. If you're doing a portrait session, let's say a family session, for example, how many images are you photographing? And then how many will you actually deliver that you're processing the way that you just described?
Family sessions are more, just because usually with kids, they move a lot. And so I'm overshooting just so I can get those in focus images. So those are usually about 800 images. And then again, I'm delivering 40, or at least I'm showing 45. And then for seniors, I've gotten to about 400 images and they're like hour and a half sessions. So, but because seniors, again, is what I do the most of. And so like, I know, especially because my equipment is so simple, like I know my equipment really well. I know it's like riding a bike with seniors for me. Like it just comes super easily. So I know exactly what to expect. I know the flow that I want that will give me the results that I want. Families, for me, that's where I started off when I worked at a family studio. So I'm very it is getting back to what I trained for originally, but they're so tiring.
Yeah.
You have
it's so true.
Especially in Utah, you've got like a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And it's like, to accommodate for the 2-year-old is very different than the 6. And so they usually take more time. They take a lot more effort, and each family's different. So those usually take more effort and time and a lot more images. Cause again, I want like in focus, and they move a lot. So
But when we're looking at what does that amount to? My math skills aren't working right this second very well. But if you're taking, let's say, 800 images, you're delivering 40. Is that 5% of the total number of images that are the final product that you're delivering to your client? I think that's right.
So you're asking the wrong person.
So it's interesting to consider too, because a lot of photographers these days are shooting for example, to shoot a wedding, and they'll shoot maybe 3,000 photos. And then in that, they'll deliver 1,000 to 1,200 to 1,500 images to their client. So that's, anywhere from 30 to 50% or 40 to 50% of the images being photographed they're delivering to the client, versus you are only delivering 5%. And to your earlier point, there are a variety of ways to go about the business, but I think that we could do a better job as photographers and moving away from this tendency that has become more popular over the last 15 years or so with digital photography, which is to overshoot and then over deliver, and maybe shoot a little bit less, certainly, but then also deliver less and deliver better, more impressive images, more select images that more aptly represent our brand and the quality of work that we actually want to deliver. And yet again, I think this is a really wonderful example for our listeners. Let's go then from the editing process then to the actual sales process. And this is where I really want to dig in deep. I'd love for you maybe just to walk all of us through literally from the time that client walks in the door, how you might have the studio set up, the time that they walk in the door to the time that they leave, and then the actual delivery process. Will you kind of take us through that step by step, what that looks like, what that sounds like, what it feels like?
Right. And then to your point, so one point with IPS is when I first did and I did clean edits, I did 100 images that we'd go through. I found the more images that we had to go through, the more overwhelmed my clients would get. And so again, people buy based off emotion. And so I was almost like shooting myself in the foot because they got so overwhelmed with the photos that my sale numbers would go down, because at the end, then the brain was just so overwhelmed. They just wanted to quit,
Yep.
And
have you had clients ask hey, do you have more photos than just these 45? I mean, did that happen every often?
I actually haven't had that happen. I know that could potentially happen, but so far I haven't had that yet. So
good.
But does part of that come from managing their expectation? They know up front that they're going to see 40 images. Do you tell them that up front?
I tell them that I'm going to show the best images, and they will be completed images. So I haven't had anybody not satisfied with those, because I usually get from each pose one that's really, really good. And then they realize if for the ones that if I have 3 that are in the same pose, but they have different smiles or there's a different expression, I've noticed that if I give too many of those, that's when that overwhelmed feeling starts to go up. And so, and again, the way that I have my IPS process, they don't have time to really think about that or overanalyze it. So I think that's the biggest difference between when you just send images and they look at it themselves. Because for me, I'm getting the first and second reaction when people mostly see their images, and I get to control that environment with IPS. Whereas if you just send images and then they're complete, so when I did that with online downloads and they have the gallery, then they go through I love this, and they go again, show someone else, and I love these. And then that's when they go through and start overanalyzing. And then that's when I found I actually would have people say, did you have any more in this one? Because they're just overthinking it. And then they start, getting really picky about it. And then the emotion starts to change.
Well, and I think there would be a different experience too, looking at, say, a gallery of tiny thumbnails on your phone. 40 images is going to seem insignificant in that context. But if they're in your studio, and I know you're going to get into kind of what this looks like, but if you're in their studio and maybe looking at a large screen, and each individual image, you're taking time with each of those and letting them react to it, respond to it, and comment on it. Now 40 images is a whole process. And the likelihood that they're going to bring up, you've got only have 40 images that you're showing them, is probably a less likely.
Right. Exactly. So again, I want to preface, this is just what I've done. And I've done I had to alter it as I've learned throughout the years what works best for my clients. And now I'm changing it again, because I'm doing these more usually in this sort of format of virtual if we don't have time to meet while I'm on location. So I'm just going to talk about what I did before I left, because I feel like my current situation is very rare for most people that are trying to transition to IPS. Okay, so when they come in, what I do to prep is I create a slideshow. I do an app of their images. And so I work with Pixie Set for that, because I already had it before. And once they did the mobile app, I like to keep things simple. So once they did the mobile app, then I I was using sticky albums, and then I wasn't using that anymore. So those are the preps that I have before I put the app on the iPad and have the slideshow ready to go. I use Lightroom for all my showing, for the same reason. There are some great programs that are specifically for order sessions. I just already pay for the Creative Cloud Lightroom, and so it works fine for me. And for things like for those programs, they like have a living room set up and they can show you the size and how it looks on the wall. I just do that manually, but again, like those programs work great. No beef on them. They're really great programs. I just like to keep things really simple for what works best for me. But anyway, are you
pushing that Lightroom picture to a large screen TV, or what format are you showing that in?
Yes. So I have it all like an HDMI cord that goes from my laptop to the TV. But okay, so sorry, you went from the beginning. So they come in and usually at that point, I'm just chit-chatting, following up with questions I had with them at their photo shoot. So when I was back in Utah in the fall, homecoming was happening. And so I would follow up like, oh my gosh, how was homecoming? What did you guys do? Was it fun? To kind of, again, because I like to emphasize my relationships with my clients. And so that kind of just helps get everyone in the vibe instead of just like, we're here to buy. Because again, I want them to be in that zone, but like I want them emotionally to get there, not for me to like force it to get there.
Yeah. Certainly.
So then I have them sit down and I have the slideshows ready to go on the big screen. And so I talk about, okay, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to see a slideshow of your images. Then we're going to go through, pick out your favorites to kind of see what would be the best fit for your walls and stuff. We'll go over print products, and then we'll get you guys all set up with what's the best fit for you. But for now, just sit back, relax, and we're going to watch a slideshow. As far as like a successful slideshow, I find that about a second or and a half, like they go quickly, and I have it at random. So they're not in order to kind of what Rich was asking. So they're not like, oh, wait, did I miss like a pose or something?
Interesting.
It's also scattered and it goes quickly as well, because I just want to just keep the high up. I just want initial reaction, which is just excitement. I want them just to get the emotion, all of that stuff. So I keep it pretty simple. Also, because when we go through and pick favorites, that's when they'll look at each of them a little bit more in process. So they do the slideshow. And then I ask like, did you guys love them? I've had them all say yes so far, so that's good. And then I take them, and
this slideshow that you're showing your clients in person, they're ultimately going to end up with the digital files for these photos that you've chosen to use for the slideshow. Is that correct?
They get a social media copy of everything that they order. So they don't get everything in the slideshow. Okay. This is just what works great for my clients. I'm finding that with seniors, they don't want all the images. And so it's kind of nice because I don't have to price it for all of the images, because I've already done all the work for, 45 images. And so I don't have to price it. So you get all or nothing sort of a thing. That was a avenue I did at some point that did not pan out super well. Just again, because then families, then at that point when they're like, oh, we have to get all of them, I could do like without some of these sort of a thing. So that I have found works best for my clients, where they get to pick their favorites, they get, whatever they want, and then they get the social media copy. And albums actually help out with that a lot. But that's a really good question. Okay. So slideshow. Oh, so after the slideshow, we go through in Lightroom, and I've said, okay, so what we're going to do is pick out which ones you love, like, or they're not your favorite. And I put them up in similar groups of like 3 to 5. And that's when they're in order. And then I have them go through and say which ones, and I mark them with like color code them.
And then are you using the survey view in Lightroom in order to show them those groupings of images?
I'm not quite sure what view I'm using.
Okay.
I just
grid view, maybe.
I'll click like all 4 and I press N, and then they just show those. So
that is the survey view. Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned that keyboard shortcut too, because that's really helpful for anybody using Lightroom. but please continue.
Oh yeah, I'm all about the shortcuts. And from there, we just go through. Here's something to keep in mind. If again, this is just my experience with seniors, is the parents are paying, the senior is not. So if the mom really likes one and the senior doesn't like one, that's where I put it as like, I like it, or as a maybe, because again, I need to acknowledge the parents, but usually the parents want to get something that their senior wants. But I put that in there. I don't like just disregard it if they're like, no, I hate it because my eyelids a little bit closer together, or, whatever reason that they have. So when I go through and there's a little bit of like a dispute of which ones they love, not like, or maybe, I always lean more towards the parent for that reason. And from then I bring out all the likes and the loves, and then usually they've taken out a good majority of them. And from
are
there,
you just 1, 2, 3 starring them, or how are you flagging those or marking them?
Red, yellow, and green. So 6, 7, and 8.
Got it. Cool.
Because I use the stars and the flags to figure out which ones in the album, which ones in the wall art, and which ones are like gift prints and stuff like that, which I'll go over in just a second.
Cool.
Where am I at? Okay. So I just did, they have all their favorite stuff. And this is when I introduce each product. I have a physical copy of everything that I offer in 2s, so that usually the mom and the senior can hold them at the same time. So then I go through and introduce each product, talk about each one. So it's like for framed prints, the benefits of framed prints versus canvas versus metal, standout, albums. We kind of go through all of those. And then I kind of get a feel. It's like, okay, so out of these, like, which ones did you guys love, think would be a good fit for your house? And I make a note of that. And from there, this is the crucial part. This is when you show them what they want actually is worth.
Okay.
And I cannot express to you enough that this is like the most nerve-wracking part always. Well, for me still, it's super nerve-wracking, but it's really important that when you show that to them. So I have like my little folder and I open it up and I tell them, okay, so I think this collection will be the best fit to get the most of what you want. And then I break down exactly what they want in there. So they're really processing and, again, communicating what comes in that package. But it's important to bring that to them and talk about it confidently. Even if you are not, it is so important to just fake it if you're not.
To not be apologetic for your pricing.
Yes, exactly. Because if they feel that sense of hesitation, that mood that you were at before when they're like super excited and like, oh my gosh, I love all of these images, it goes down and the sale's not going to go really well. So just being really confident. So I open that up and I explain what's in there, and then I just shut my mouth for a bit. Like I don't say anything. I go back to my computer, let the mom look through it and don't say anything unless she asks me questions. And then from there, when I kind of get the sense that she's processed it, it's like, all right, so is that the collection that we want to go with today? Do you have any questions? I mean, again, or you could say, all right, so which collection did you want to go with? Let's start picking the one for the wall art. And that's when you just move to the next part. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Haylee, you've been kind of quiet over there. Do you have any questions for Keala about that side of things or that next step?
I do. I actually have a couple questions, but I'm going to hold 2 because I think you may answer them before we get there. Okay. The first one was my biggest thing is trying to convince someone, a mom or the child, senior, that these prints are more valuable than going to Walgreens or Walmart and getting them for a fraction of the price. Mm-hmm. But like if they were to order the album and then they get, you only give social media size images, but for those who are delivering full res images, if you are, how can you convince them of that? Because I've always had that issue, even if I'm talking to a family member and I'm like, you have to order from this site because they will look so much better. And I mean, it's through, I use Pass and they connect with White House Custom Color. Yeah. But that's been my biggest issue, is trying to figure out how to convey how important these nice pieces are.
Right. So there's a couple of ways. So with my process, currently I've kind of almost eliminated that, just because when they're looking and holding, so I try and make them different. That's the big difference. So a gift print, which for me is an 8x10 and smaller, they're all mounted and they're all luster coated. So they look different than what you can get at Costco. That actually helped a ton when I started doing that.
Yeah.
You do have people that still just want the digital images. And for me, the digital images are the same price as my prints. So I tell them that the social media is complimentary. So you could just get the digital images if you want. And I can totally do that. They're the same price as this. And then at that point, it's like, oh, okay, well, I might as well get stuff that I'm already planning to print and put on my walls anyways.
Right.
So did that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. Like, that's a good way to approach it, because I've just never really offered prints too often, which is why I'm really excited about this whole process. I'm learning so much. But
go ahead. Go ahead, Amy.
But that's been really the biggest issue, because even like I have Walgreens canvases that I printed long before I ever started in photography. So it's one of those things, and I can tell a difference. I mean, you can see it, very obvious, but to someone who's not in this profession, is it as obvious?
Exactly. So it's only obvious when they compare it with their own stuff. So which is why I have the tangible product that they're holding.
Yeah.
Feel different. Yeah. Also offering things that they can't get, like I believe metal prints are still pretty much a professional lab thing. Wood prints, I think they're starting to kind of get more mainstream, but just offering things, and like, again, with the gift prints, like making them look different and feel different, because the image quality in front, we can see that as professionals and as artists, but for them, I mean, they're just looking, they're like, that's someone that they know, that's all that they're concentrating on, which makes sense. As far as like the quality is, if you just make it feel and look different, that helps kind of take out those, I guess, doubts or questions that sometimes their clients might have.
Right.
That's actually, I love this, because photographers, I think, have a tendency of speaking kind of idealistically or philosophically, and trying to communicate on that level with clients who don't know photography the way that, again, we tend to project on them. I think it's minimizing the possibility of being able to sell them on a product that carries the level of quality that you're describing. So making it tangible, making it practical by literally handing them something, and not just anything, because as you pointed out, I mean, you can order prints, and Haylee was alluding to this as well. You can order prints from all these different places, but Keala, as you pointed out, you can order offering products that actually not only look different, but actually feel different. And to have that tangible experience that is their experience, not something that you're trying to sell to them conceptually, I think is really, really important. And that's really, really powerful. We've got about 10 minutes here, and I don't want to rush you too much, but once they get to that process where they've had the opportunity to look at these collections, what is then the next step? You're saying, hey, do you see a collection there that you really love? What's the initial response normally that they give?
There is a bit of hesitation there sometimes, even though they've seen it before, even though I refer to it, before. Again, sometimes they're busy and they're just like, oh, I'll get to it later. So you do have that hesitation sometimes, but it's important, again, that what your I guess, just
demeanor, maybe.
Yeah, like just confidence, and if they have questions, not faltering on them because of doubts that you have in yourself, because that might not be what they're trying to confirm. So what Haylee was talking about, when someone's like, well, like I just print these off at Walgreens, or can like having, because again, it's that sense of control of their images, but they really don't realize that usually at some point they take forever to do it on their own. The quality isn't the same. And at that point, they're embarrassed to come back to you. And so it's just fulfilling needs and wants that they don't know that they already have, and taking care of them in that sense. But when in that dead air, or while they're talking to the senior, or while they're figuring out like with their checkbook or their budget, just being quiet. And if they have questions, like answering with confidence, that goes a long way, because then you're setting the tone, like this is expected and this isn't abnormal for me, sort of a thing. And that way, if you don't give them the excuse to feel that way, as far as like, it just, again, in how you're presenting yourself, how you're presenting your pricing, then they won't doubt it. You know, you just confirm, like, if you have a question, confirm it very confidently, and then be like, all right, so any other questions? Are we ready to start picking from your wall art? Which collection do you think will be the best fit for you? Mm-hmm. And then we go from there. And that's when we start, picking contenders for the wall art and narrowing all the stuff down for the albums and everything.
Now, do you get any clients that are like, I guess, could be hesitant as far as like, hey, we don't really want to make a decision right now. I need to talk to my husband, or anything like that. Like, hey, we don't want to be pressured to be forced to buy something right now. We want to think about it, or right. what happens in those kind of situations? That's
a really good question. So what I've tried to combat that with addressing before at the photo shoot. So afterwards, again, it's setting expectations. All decision makers need to be there. This will be the only time to order unless you want to upgrade for like grad announcements. I could go and explain to them why, like what I told you then, like it will be so much easier to do it in person, because once they go home, you're not controlling the environment of emotional selling when they leave. Mm-hmm. Most of the time when they leave, they're not going to the first couple of times, I had that happen because I was super nervous and I was like, yeah, sure, totally. But most of the time when they left, they would text me back the next day and they would spend less because they were embarrassed and their husband didn't see the images. So I'm not controlling the emotional environment. Yeah. He's just seeing the number. And so I like to tell them before at the photo shoot, at the pre-consult. So make sure if dad has a say with the budget or he needs to be there. This is the only time that we'll do order sessions. And just saying that with confidence, I found that if I try and explain it to them, they don't quite understand. So if I just say that's not a budge thing, and it's really to help them out. It's not, I don't really want it to come across as I'm not flexible, because I am, but I know for them, it's just going to set them up to, again, spiral a little bit and then doubt and second guess, all of that stuff.
Totally makes sense. Okay. So they, at this point, let's say they commit to a particular package. What does that next step in the process look like?
So then I put together their invoice and then show it to them, break down, make sure everything looks okay, go through the images, make sure all of that looks okay. And then just tell them that if everything looks correct, then I can take American Express, Master, Visa, which one would be best for you. And then that's when I take the payment. And then then they leave and I order everything as soon as they leave so that it's fresh in the memory and it's already going. Because I tell them it will take 2 or 3 weeks. And sometimes it could if they send me back the wrong thing, or if the product comes back and it's, the coloring's weird, there's a variety of things that could be wrong with a product. Especially during busy season, I find I have the most for near Christmas and stuff. But I order everything right then, right after they leave, as soon as they get the payment. If they do a payment plan, which I don't be do we want a payment plan? I only offer it if they ask for a payment plan. Okay. And then mine is they can do between 2 to 4 payments between now and 5 months. Okay. And I don't give them any images or any products until it's completely paid, and I don't order them until they're completely paid either. And this is kind of side notes. Some people say don't do sneak peeks beforehand. You can do sneak peeks beforehand. I personally don't, because I have found they hurt my sales. But I've heard from other people that they don't see a difference. So
when you say sneak peeks, do you mean showing a physical product?
Being this is a photo from today and sending it via text message or posting it on social media.
Okay.
Because in a way they feel like they already have it.
Interesting. Okay.
Then I order their products and they're usually there within a week. So I'm hey, they're here early. When can you guys come by to come pick them up? And then they come pick them up. I give them their social media images via online download from Pixie Set. as soon as they leave or as soon as they pay in full. So that goes immediately out to them with like the app and everything like that. And then they come and pick up their products after I've made sure that they're perfect about a week or two later.
Have you seen any benefit, or have you ever experimented with actually taking the product to their home and kind of setting it up for them and helping them further decide where these images go in their home?
Yes. So that's what I did before because I didn't have a studio space. So I would do the in-person sales in their home and connect it to their home. And that was difficult because some HDMI things were a little bit more picky than other TVs. So
Right.
I would drive to their house and drop them off and hang them up for them. But I found once I had the studio, because I was still planning on doing that, that most of them had no idea where they were going to put it yet.
Oh, okay.
Even though it was like a week or two later.
Sure.
So eventually for my clients, they loved it if they could just do it on their own. However, I do know people that, especially with that investment, have been able to be also the person that could hang it up for them and being the professional in that sense. So that way, the mom doesn't have to like bug the dad and there's like a fight, like how come you haven't hung this up yet, sort of a thing.
Right,
That is definitely a great way to do it as well.
So you can kind of go either way in this. This is, and I know, again, we're kind of rushing because this topic is such a loaded one and there's so many different elements of it to cover. But I want to at least close with a really interesting fact that you shared with me when we did the other podcast episode. And that was the difference between what you were getting from a session before IPS versus what you're now getting now that you're actually implementing IPS in your business. Because some photographers might say, hey, this idea of me spending so much time and effort and energy after the shoot, I'm already tired. Like, I don't want to put any more time and effort into this. Is it really actually worth it? What would you say to them?
Let me just tell you the numbers because they kind of speak for themselves. So I started shoot and burn with seniors at $350. When my first sale after I switched to IPS was $800 or $900, which is a huge jump for the extra 3 hours, possibly. Now it's like 2.5 hours I've been able to shave off. But now my average right now is $2,200 for seniors.
So you're going from $350 shoot and burn, and it's convenient, to now putting a few extra hours in and $2,200 average, which is just, I mean, for most people, even me, I mean, I don't even know that I had any print order come close to that. 99% of the clients that I work with, that is just a mind-boggling number. And this is the kind of money, and this is not an anomaly, by the way. I mean, other conversations that I've had or heard about other photographers that are implementing IPS in their business, these are the kinds of numbers that they're seeing, and it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, honestly, that's what, because as we talk about in the podcast together that I did earlier, I went from weddings to seniors. I always wanted to do seniors, but had that it was just like that unspoken thing, like you can't make money doing seniors. So I had to do them kind of on the side from weddings, but weddings, the part of weddings that I just could not tolerate anymore was like the 10-hour wedding days. Like I would be so tired. Whereas seniors were, the shoot's only an hour and a half and like a lot shorter. I did them on weekdays. So then I had weekends available. I was able to control so much more. And I knew that in order to change and not get the money that I was getting from weddings and get that to work for seniors was to switch to IPS. Again, like this is just one model compared, like there are so many possibilities as far as how to make a model that works best for your business, for your clients, for your cost of sales and business. And again, like you said, a loaded topic.
It is, but I mean, you so eloquently communicated your experience and the way that you're implementing this in your business. And I really can't thank you enough. Haylee, Rich, Heather, do you guys have any questions as we kind of close today's Workflow Wednesday episode?
I do have one.
Go ahead, Haylee.
Sorry. This was my question earlier, and you actually touched on it, is you mentioned having them upgrade to grad announcements. Are you offering announcements as part of your packages? And are you designing those? And do you have templates, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
And what are grad announcements? I'm so sorry.
What you send out when the high schooler is graduating to all the friends and family.
Oh, okay, I didn't do that, so I'm sorry.
It's like a Christmas card, but just for the senior, just that one person.
Okay. Yeah.
So in my packages, they get gradually more. I use like they're kind of a standard for my clients, and I feel like for most seniors. So the number that they get depends on how high the package is. I do not design them at the moment because right now I'm getting the most of my seniors in the fall, and it's very overwhelming for them to design and get all of that figured out for the spring. So that is one that I do virtually. I send a grad catalog to them. I don't design them. I use osnapboutique.com for my designs. She has a really great variety, and her stuff just like really complements my brand and for my girls really well. So I send them out in March, and from there they can upgrade because then I have them fill out a form, tell me which two. I have them limit. If you give them too many options to choose, like send me all the ones you want me to work with, then you're like working on them forever. So like, send me your 2 that you want me to play around with, and with the 5 images you want me to play around with. And then once they proof, then I tell them like those I ship directly to them because sometimes they're a little bit of procrastinators, and it's like 2 weeks before graduation. So I have them shipped straight to their house, and then just follow up with them to make sure that they came okay and they look great, all that stuff.
Awesome. Perfect. And Heather, you had a question as well.
My question can wait. I see that we're past the hour mark, and I don't. Yeah.
Feel free to just throw that in there, and we'll finish up with this.
You do want me to ask my question?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Okay. I was just wondering if your sitting fee is a really critical number for you to get the type of clients that you want that are not going to actually deal with very much sticker shock when you're doing your in-person sales. Are you finding that sitting fee is at a price point where you're getting the clients that can afford to come in and spend this $2,200 that you're talking about,
Yes, that's a really good question, Heather. So I had one of my friends that also does IPS with me did some research, and they found that your sitting fee actually equals the type of client that will spend more. So I have 3 different sitting fees. I have a mini, which is pretty much for senior boys because usually the mom just wants some photos. My middle package, it's a pretty big jump. And then my top one, which is kind of like the luxe, where it's like 3 hours, which is usually overwhelming for most people. But both of those top 2 ones have like hair and makeup included. So it puts the price up quite a bit. And I have found, because right now I'm at like a $350, $400 sitting fee. And it is scary because it mentally, like for me, I was like, oh, they're not going to spend as much. But I have found that with this higher sitting fee, they mentally are more prepared and aware that they're going to be spending more, which doesn't seem to make sense, but at the same time it does.
Yeah, you're attracting clients of a certain demographic, that can afford the IPS process more than. Okay.
Yeah, we have to keep in mind that the average client is, $350 or $400 for a portrait session. As much as that might seem like a small fee to us as photographers, because we're listening to these, glory stories, basically, of all these high-end photographers that are charging ridiculous amounts. That's actually a really high amount for the average individual making really the average income in the U.S. So the idea of spending $350 or $400 for a session when you could go get images maybe at a chain studio or something like that for a small fraction of that amount, that is a higher end price. So naturally, it would filter out those who can't afford then to further give you money for prints or albums or other products. So that totally makes sense. Yeah. Well, this has been good. And again, it feels rushed because it is a loaded topic, but Keala, you've been so wonderful to share so much information. And again, so eloquently, this is like, you need to do this kind of thing more often because you're really, really good at it. But
thank you.
Thank you so much for making time for the Workflow Wednesday series and the Bokeh Podcast. Again, for those of you listening in on the podcast, we do these Facebook Live sessions on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And you can come back and watch the live version. Occasionally, we'll have more visuals that you're going to want to see the video version for. And then we push these out to the Bokeh Podcast, bokehpodcast.com on Wednesday evening. And of course, you can subscribe to pretty much any podcast app you can imagine. So make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already, that you continue to follow this. And Keala, thank you again so much for making time for us this week.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Good to see you guys.
Yes.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought by leaving a review of the podcast in iTunes or the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and maybe suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@photographersedit.com. The Bokeh Podcast is brought to you by Photographers Edit, custom image editing for the wedding and portrait photographer. Visit photographersedit.com.